through the seniors. He is going to be talking about preparing and navigating the teenage years. So welcome, Jonah.
There we go. Thank you, guys. Awesome. Well, it's really cool to be here. This is my first time ever being at Moms, but what's really cool to think about is this is a ministry that I'm sure more than I even realized has profoundly shaped my life. Again, I've never darkened the door of Moms before, but my mom, Julia Carpenter, came through here during her time raising 4 very young boys. I mean, I think I was like 4 years old when my youngest 2 twin brothers were born. Then there's one in between us as well. And so it's really cool to be part of a ministry and to give back to a ministry that, again, in more ways than I'm sure I even know, has impacted my life. And it's really made me the person I am today. Yeah, like my mom said too, I also get to be the resident expert on teens here at Damascus Community Church. I kind of think of it as like, you guys know the show Pawn Stars? How Rich just seems to have like a friend that's an expert on everything. Like you see a guy up there, his name's like Larry, and he's like an expert on David Hasselhoff's chest hair. And you're like, how did your life circumstances lead you to that point? That's kind of how I feel about being the resident expert on teenagers here. I've never been the mother of a teenager, never been the father of a teenager either, but I spend a lot of time with the teens of this church and school community here in my role. So very excited to be here with all of you today. Well, if we're going to talk about what the teenage years are and how you navigate them, I think we first have to answer the question, what even are the teenage years? How do we understand the teenage years? And I'm not talking about a strict years definition. Some people say the teenage years are like 13 to 17, then after that they're adults. Some say that it's 13 to 18 or 13 to 19. Some even maybe include kind of 12. I mean, we have some overlap between 12-year-olds also being middle schoolers. But what are the teenagers? How should we understand and think about the teenage years? What are they all about? Well, the teenage years are fundamentally a time of change. That's what they are. They're a time of change. They're a time when teens undergo several significant life changes. Like I think of all the teens that have gone through my ministry and where they are when they start and where they are by the time they graduate high school. When I have 12-year-olds come in that are, about yay tall and their voices haven't dropped yet, and by the time they graduate, they are capable of driving, they're capable of voting. Some of them have jobs for the first time. Their voices drop. They change in a lot of really radical and important ways. So what are some things that teens experience or teens go through? I think there's a spelling error on the notes, and I apologize, got through, during the teenage years. What do teens go through during the teenage years, and how does it shape them as they begin to change? Well, first, teens experience biological change. They grow. They change. They have those aforementioned voice drops. Puberty changes a lot of things about the ways that kids are wired, about the ways that they understand themselves and the world, about the ways that they look. One thing I've realized is that, especially for guys often, as they start growing up and getting taller, sometimes the way that they understand you as their parent looks a little bit different or feels a bit different. It's a lot easier to yell at your kid like this than it is to yell at your kid like that. It's different. In fact, just the other day, I had to yell at a kid for something. He did something he shouldn't have done and put himself in a situation that was kind of dangerous. And literally his explanation for why it was okay for him to do this is, I'm 14 and really tall. The kid told me that last week on Wednesday. So it really happens. Kids go through these kind of changes, but not only do they go through biological changes that we can see in terms of them getting facial hair or getting taller, but kids also go through a lot of emotional rewiring. Like the way that they navigate emotions, it can be totally all over the place. We know this. Teens are happier than they've ever been before, and then 2 seconds later, they are the saddest person on planet Earth, and then they're angry, they're tired all the time. There's just all these up and down changes that happen as we go through these biological, complete and utter rewiring of our brains. All this happens because biologically, teens are kids in the process of becoming adults. That's not the only kind of changes that teens go through. They also go through very significant social changes. What do I mean by that? Well, some of you guys have young kids, and I never have again, but I've heard the stories of your toddler walking around wanting to be next to you all the time. Like I've heard stories like people going to the bathroom and they can see their little toddler's fingers underneath the door because you cannot get a break during those years, right? They're just joined at the hip, constantly wanting to be around you. You are the coolest person they have ever known because you're one of the only people they've ever known. But when kids become teens, that starts to change a little bit. See, relationally, you stop being the center of the world, and they start caring a lot more about what their friends think. the epicenter of who they are and who they want to be and who they care about and who they value and whose opinions they're going to look for and whose advice they're going to ask for, is no longer just their family. They start caring more about their peer relationships, the other people that are in their life, their friends at school, their friends in their neighborhood. Now, another big part of this too, of course, is the relationship with the opposite gender. Something I've seen as I've watched kids grow up is that oftentimes, there's when they're really little, when they're toddlers, or when they're really young, they don't really realize that, boys and girls are all that different. They're kind of just friends with whoever happens to be near them. And then normally, they grow up and they start realizing that the other gender is different. For years, they're kind of weirded out by that. Even middle schoolers sometimes are like that. If you ever go to a middle school dance, you can normally walk down the aisle between where the guys and the girls are dancing on their own to different music. That's sometimes how it is. But usually during the teenage years, at some point, switch is flipped. And teens move and really begin to care about the other gender. They begin to think about them in kind of a different way. They're trying to woo them. And they'll spend time, energy, effort, attention, making sure that they can get the attention of the other gender. It's a really big social change that happens, and I'm sure as parents it's really strange to navigate. And then finally, teens experience intellectual changes. Pardon me, what do I mean by this? Well, I mean, during the teenage years, it's very common for teens to start asking new questions, for them to start challenging things that they've heard before. Now, I know kids do this as well, but normally kids will ask you a question, why, and they expect you to be the ultimate source of truth in the world, or just kind of take your word for whatever you tell them. With teens, they're a lot more likely to challenge something, to push back against it. There's maybe things that you've taught them for years that they've affirmed throughout their entire life. And growing up, you believe that they knew something to be true, but once they become teens, they start to question it or doubt it or push back against it. For me, in my role, this is one of the changes I bump into probably the most often. Kids come to me with questions about something I know that they totally affirmed, 2 years ago, but now it's a total doubt in their mind. It's a big change that they go through in their life. And during this stage, I find that teens often want to kind of reinvent themselves. They want to become their own person. They have this desire for independence that sometimes fuels hard questions, that sometimes leads them to not want to be dragging onto your coattails anymore, to find out what they truly believe. All right, so these are some changes that teens experience. So how do we respond as people? Well, I think there's two ways we can respond. The first is one that often people respond to, and that's with groaning, okay? You've probably seen it before. Like maybe you walk into a parking lot, you see a bunch of teens just causing problems, and your natural response is just go, the teens are here, Has anybody seen those e-bikes that are driving around the neighborhood all the time? I see teens on e-bikes swerving into my lane all the time on the road, and I groan a lot, okay? So we can respond by confusion to what teens are experiencing. We see their biological changes, and they kind of look strange, they don't look like the kids that maybe we knew before. They maybe smell kind of funny. They have this culture that is odd, and we don't understand it. And I'm starting to realize the point of the things that become popular. The reason that we don't understand this is because they are designed so that older people, adults, don't understand them. I think that's why they're cool. They can have their own kind of distinct, independent things. As we walk through these different symptoms, right? All of these things that happen during the teenage years are kind of hard to deal with. Physical changes are hard to deal with. Again, they smell different, they look different, they sound different, it's strange, it's kind of weird, right? The social changes that they go through, they can cause us to groan too. I mean, teens have this own subset of culture. They want to rage against the machine. I'm sure as a parent of a teen too, it's hard to go from a kid grabbing on your coattails all the time to suddenly wanting nothing to do with you. It's hard to navigate that. It's even hard for me as I have students come to youth group when they're 7th graders. They think the world of me. By the time they're teens, they're kind of indifferent. It's hard. And, we even think about these intellectual changes. Sometimes it's frustrating when kids just constantly, ask questions or ideas or just don't take our word for anything, or we wind up butting heads with them in a way that we really wouldn't when they were little kids anymore. So we can respond with groaning, as many do. But there's another response, a response I want to challenge you guys to see the teenage years with, and that's responding with gratitude. See, the teenage years are actually a good time. They are, as we're going to understand more. Actually, I got a slide here with that, I believe. The teenage years are a necessary part of God's good design, where young people begin in new and exciting ways to live out the image of God. Teenage years are a necessary part of God's good design, where young people begin in new and exciting ways to live out the image of God. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, the teenage years are necessary. I mean, unless you want your kid to stay a kid forever, if you ever want them to grow up, the teenage years are a necessary path they have to go through to become the person God ultimately created them to be. It's hard, it's challenging, it's kind of awkward in the middle stages sometimes, but it's good as well. It's part of God's good design. This is not a result of sinful brokenness in the world. The teenage years are something that God created with good intentions in mind. It's ultimately a way that young people can begin in new and exciting ways to live out the image of God. What I would say is, in my life, I get to watch teens grow up. And one of the greatest moments I have in youth ministry, and happens all the time with teens, is kids start making their faith their own. They begin to, through questions and challenges and sometimes doubts, get to a place that they really have a real relationship with God, not just their parents' relationship anymore, but their relationship with the living God. Even the social changes that they go through. Yeah, it's hard to have your kid have this own subset of culture that you don't understand, to no longer invite you into everything in life, but ultimately that's the steps they need to take to someday go and start their own family. All of these changes that we can sometimes groan at, we can also be grateful for. All these things that we sometimes look down on teenagers for are really a blessing designed by a good God who has a good plan to make people ultimately more like him. So yes, the teenage years are the time of profound change and confusion, especially for parents, but the teenage years are also good times designed by a good God. All right, with that being said then, how do we navigate the teenage years? How do we embrace these challenges? Pardon me. Well, I think the first thing we need to do is be aware of the issues facing the teens of the day. I think I have a blank there for teens of the day. And through wisdom and prayer, seek to guide them through and protect them from the world's challenges. So everything I'm going to say to you today, as I walk through some specifics, a lot of what I say at least is going to be outdated. Here's the reason for that. Times are changing constantly. I've been thinking about teenagers today and comparing it to my time in high school and just seeing how different the world is. Like, for example, my generation used Facebook. I was part of the early wave of Facebook. We had kind of AOL, then MySpace, and Facebook. That's what I thought social media was. I remember going and making long posts and playing games on Facebook. That's how I envisioned social media. What generations after me have gotten into Instagram and TikTok, these really fast-form social medias where you just kind of scroll through and you see a bunch of different little pieces of content. It's just a different way that they've understood social media. And now we're on the precipice of AI, whatever that might ultimately end up becoming. I don't even understand it. But my experience, that I had recently kind of proved that this is true, proved that times are changing. Technology is a huge, very tangible way this is happening. On Monday, I subbed for a class at DCS. I haven't subbed for a class at DCS in a while. And I was shocked at how little pen and paper was used and how pretty much every assignment in math class was done on a computer. That was different than when I was in high school. We had a computer lab. You had a desktop locked up in one room. Now they have these carts of computers that go around everywhere. It's totally different. The world is changing. But there's also some issues beyond technology that are changing. There's also new challenges, new questions that are entering the world all the time. Like throughout my entire time in elementary, middle school, and high school, in the U.S., gay marriage was not legally recognized. 2015, that changed right after I graduated. And now I have just different questions students are asking me. This is a real story. I had a student one time come up to me and tell me that they had a friend who said they were identifying as a cat. And they were asking me how they could navigate that question. There's new challenges that are facing the world today. Things look different. And if you have a young kid, even if they're 6 years old, in 7 years from now, there's going to be new challenges and questions. But whatever challenges and questions arise, my encouragement to you is to answer them with prayer, with wisdom, be thinking through these issues, go to the Lord, seek Him. And that being said, I'm going to focus on 2 points today. 2 things that I have more conversations with parents about than any other topics. I get a lot of questions from parents, a lot of conversations, but generally they center around these 2 things. The first is mental health. How do kids understand themselves? How do we navigate challenges that come with mental health? How do parents navigate anxiety, depression, things like that? The second is technology. I have a ton of questions from parents about technology all the time. It is certainly up there with the things I wind up talking with parents about the most. All right, so again, I don't have time to cover everything about parenting teens, but I'm going to cover these 2 topics because these are the ones that parents talk to me about the most often. All right, so first I want to give some stats according to the World Health Organization as we begin to think about mental health. First, 1 in 7 people aged 10 to 19 experience some sort of mental condition. There's a lot of changes that kids go through. There's a lot of challenges that they have to navigate, and 1 in 7 people experience some sort of mental condition, whatever that might be. Anxiety and depression are among the leading disorders. In fact, I believe these are the two most prominent disorders, so they're the two we're going to focus on today, anxiety and depression. And third, a very sobering stat, suicide is the third leading cause of death among those aged 15 to 29. This is a real issue. It affects tons of teens, and ultimately something we have to be on guard with and to understand well. I can tell you it's really scary when parents have to navigate these issues. One of the scariest conversations I ever have are when parents come into my office and say that they're worried about their kid in this direction. And it happens often. I've seen God work through it, and I've seen amazing turnarounds and things like that in my time. But it's a scary conversation. It's helpful to know how we can approach it well. All right, well, I want to talk about some mental health disorders. I apologize if that's a little bit small there. But I want to talk about the two kind of main ones that face most teens today and face most people today. The first is anxiety, right? Anxiety disorders, as you see there, are a group of mental health diagnoses characterized by excessive, persistent, and irrational fear or worry about everyday situations or events. That's a quote from the Mental Health Foundation. That's their words, not mine. So note this, that anxiety disorders aren't just moments of anxiety. It is totally normal and very common for kids, teens, even I'm sure many of you, to experience moments of anxiety. Anxiety disorders are different than that. It is a constant feeling of anxiety, one that affects quality of life and changes the way that things are understood. It changes the way that you understand the world around you. It's something that you kind of can't shake. It just stays with you. Depression, also known as major depressive disorder, is a common and serious mental disorder that negatively affects how you feel, think, act, and perceive the world. Again, it is normal to go through seasons of sadness. It's normal to go through seasons when you feel down, but if your life is characterized by constant feelings of depression, you may have major depressive disorder. That may be something that your teen has as well. So as parents, how do we navigate these? Well, I think the first thing is simply recognizing them, knowing what the warning signs are, and being able to engage with them well. We talked a little bit about the anxiety disorders that is characterized by persistent, irrational fear, worry about everyday situations or events. Those are some ways that we can recognize that when we look for those warning signs of constant worry. Maybe you look at changes in their sleep schedule. You look at irritability or acting very quickly. All of those can be symptoms of anxiety, something to look out for. Symptoms of depression include feeling sad, irritable, empty, or hopeless. They include losing interest in activities that they once enjoyed. Sometimes a symptom of depression involves changing sleep schedules. Now, that's common for teens as well as they're developing in their brains. Their sleep schedules will change anyways, but their sleep schedules are radically changing all of a sudden. Feelings of worthlessness or excessive guilt, or, of course, thoughts of death or suicide. All of these are symptoms of anxiety and depression. So as parents, how can we help kids if they come to us with those? I want to be clear and give a caveat that I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm just somebody that's walked along a number of parents in these issues with them. And here's what I have found, has worked. When a kid comes to you with a question like that, the first thing I'd know, and I've kind of already mentioned it a few times, is be aware that it's normal for kids to experience these things in small doses. It's normal for kids to be anxious about something or to have a small season of depression. What I found is sometimes if you give a kid a label, they'll put themselves in that box, and it can ultimately do more harm than good sometimes. We're too quick to give a diagnosis. Watch, be aware of what's happening in your kid's life. Continue to watch them and see how they're reacting. If it goes on for a long time, I'd say that's the time to seek help and to take things very seriously. Yep. However, you should also look for patterns in their life. You should kind of be aware of some of the things that might be happening. Is their sleep schedule or motivation consistently and verifiably changing? Are you seeing drastic changes in them? Again, puberty will bring some of that anyways, but are there notable moments when they are completely seeing themselves or changing how they're motivated about things? Are they socially or emotionally withdrawn? Does your kid want super extroverted, then all of a sudden they're pulling back from everyone in their life and not telling anyone anything and simply resting and isolating themselves on their own? Have they hidden away from all the activities that they once loved. That they used to love doing all sorts of things. Now all of a sudden, they're casting it all aside and just kind of becoming a hermit. Well, when those behaviors appear, don't immediately jump to conclusions, but I would encourage you to open the door for conversations. Maybe you walk up to them and you simply ask, hey, I noticed you've been more tired lately, or I noticed you haven't been wanting to go to baseball lately. Is everything okay? I think starting that conversation, one-on-one's a great way to open the door for them to talk about things. But teenagers famously don't always love to talk about things. That's something that's kind of known about them. If they don't talk, what I would encourage you to do then is maybe just start reaching out to other people in their lives that also know them. Like maybe reach out to their teachers and be like, hey, I'm seeing some things at home that are concerning. Are you seeing those same things at school? Like engage with the other adults that are speaking into your teen's life to try to find help. Now, if there's something wrong, if you do notice that there's something wrong, I'd encourage you to go to a pastor or a therapist, somebody that can speak into your life and speak into your kid's life as well. And I'd also say, and this is something that I've just seen in my time here, again, I'm not a professional, but I'd also really urge you to be very picky about the person you allow to speak into your kid's life. I've seen amazing impacts from therapy in kids' lives. Like I've seen kids that were in really dark places totally come out of it, and the therapist was one of the tools God used to help them get there. I've also seen therapy be really divisive for kids. I've seen it pit kids against their parents. I've seen kids go in, and as they explain some of their problems and, told the therapist that they were a Christian, I've heard, of therapists saying things like, well, the reason you feel this guilt is because you've been told that you're a sinner. And kind of, I've seen kids almost turned away from their faith and turned away from their parents on account of bad therapists. So I would urge you to be very careful about the person you approach and allow it to speak into your kid's life. I would say in general, Christian therapy is probably a better way to go, having a faith-based therapist. That way you at least know they're on the same page with you in that. That being said, I've seen great results from non-faith-based therapists. Just make sure you can really trust the person that you're allowing to speak into your kid's life. It is better to be picky about that than to see the results of bad therapy. All right, so what else can we do to help kids navigate challenges with mental health? How else can we help them? Well, first is start building a support system before a problem arises. This is something I think is kind of underrated. I haven't seen this talked about a lot, but I've just noticed this from my observations, my conversations with parents, is that the teens who tend to respond the best when a crisis arises are the teens that already had a support system in place before an issue came up. Now, I'm not saying that you need to send your kid to therapy preemptively, but I am saying that strong relationships with trusted people will help prevent and navigate crises for teens. So according to the National Library of Medicine, teens struggling with mental health should ask for help and invest in healthy relationships. Notice that there's kind of a bit of a hidden expectation behind the steps teens are supposed to take. What is that? Well, the expectation is that they already have people in their life that they can go ask for help, that they can go and trust. As we've talked about, sometimes teens are navigating drastic social changes and they no longer trust you with absolutely everything. Make sure that there's people in their life that they can also talk to, that you can corroborate stories with, that will work with you as your teen navigates different challenges in life. I mean, it's fairly common for kids to approach me and tell me something that they haven't yet told mom and dad. Like that happens very regularly in my life. And so make sure that you have people in your life and people in your kid's life that they trust. So here's some practical things you can do to start building a support system for your teens so that they're ready if a crisis arises. First, encourage your kids to build a relationship with your pastor. Whether it's Pastor Andy, whether it's me at the church here, whether it is the pastor at whatever church you may go to, they should know their pastor by their first name. Sometimes they're more willing to open up to them because they know that it's their job to help them. Like kids know that's in my job description, to listen to their problems. And so sometimes they're more comfortable talking with me than they would be with somebody else because they don't want to be a burden on their time. I'd also have open, regular, positive communication with their teachers. Like, talk to their teachers, get to know them, and not just when a problem arises, but get to know their teachers, know the people that are speaking into their life, as much as you can, develop a friendship with them, help out in class to get to know the people that are speaking into your kids' lives. That way when an issue arises and you go to talk to them, there's already some rapport there, there's already a relationship. Maybe something as simple as talking to their coaches just for a second after practice, just wishing their coach a happy day, get to know them. I can tell you this, in my experience, it makes helping parents easier when they have a relationship with me already. I've seen plenty of parents who have come to me and said, hey, my kid's having an issue, and I know how to speak into that parent's life and how to encourage them better. I know how to work with that parent in a way that's going to best help that kid. On the flip side, I've sometimes had parents come to me and say, hey, my kid's having an issue, and I don't even know the parent. I've never talked to them or their kid before. They're trying to find a support system, and those kids are, in my experience, from what I've seen, are a lot less likely to have really big changes. So yeah, build a support system before a problem arises. Part of it is that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If they have people in their life that already know, they already know, love them, and they're already speaking into their lives and are already there for them, I mean, how much more likely are they to avoid this problem altogether? But if a crisis does arise, make sure that there's other people in your kid's life and in your life that can help you navigate it. All right, the final point I want to talk about, one of the biggest, most prominent ones, is navigating technology. Navigating technology for teens. I want to open with a little story for you guys, okay? Some of you guys might know I'm engaged. I'm getting married in I think it's 38 days or something like that, so super excited about that. Thank you. Very excited for that season of life. And kind of as a joke the other day, I went up to some 7th graders, and I said, guys, I trust you more than anyone else in my life. What's some advice I need to know for marriage? And they gave me some fantastic answers. I think my favorite answer I've gotten is I've been going around and asking teens. Somebody told me that I'm supposed to leave the toilet seat up to assert dominance. That was one of my favorite answers I've gotten so far. But I remember I was talking to a group of 7th graders, and an older kid overheard me and unprompted came up to me. And he said, my number one piece of advice for marriage is if you have kids, don't let them get on technology till later in life. I was kind of like, yeah, that's interesting. And I looked at him in the eyes and said, well, if you could go back in time, do you wish that you had gotten a smartphone and access to the internet later? And he said, absolutely. It was terrible for me. What I would say as we think about technology is this. I'd encourage you. Again, I can't tell you the steps you need to take as parents. I can't tell you that you should or shouldn't allow your kids on screens or at what age. I don't have the authority to tell you that. But I would encourage you, make choices now that your kids will thank you for later when it comes to technology. See, technology poses a lot of danger for teens. And it does so in a couple of different directions. We're going to talk about 3 of them. 3 dangers of technology. The first is this, that technology can become all-consuming for teens. It can become everything about who they are. As we talked about, the teenage brain is like rewiring itself. They're developing new emotions. They're understanding things in new and profound ways. The way I like to think about it is almost like the adult brain is really efficient. It's wired itself down and knows the directions it needs to move in to solve problems. A kid's brain is all over the place. It's almost like a teen's brain is trying to get the right answers. It's trying to check everything it knows. It's trying to seek out new information so that it can be prepared to lock itself down to become the person they're going to be for the rest of their lives. It's like one last-ditch effort to make sure that they're right about the person they're going to become. Because of that, teens are really quick to seek out new experiences. This can be a really beautiful thing, but it can also make them really susceptible to becoming addicted to technology. Instead of seeking out new experiences in real life, instead of trying new things, trying new sports, they have immediate access to all the information in the world at their fingertips, in their pockets often, all the time. Sometimes that becomes everything about who they are, and it has an impact on them. It takes away from the necessary parts of life, the necessary parts of growing up. Very tangible what I've seen is it impacts their grades in school pretty often. If a kid is online all the time, they're putting aside whether they're actually doing their homework. Oftentimes, kids that are really addicted to technologies don't have very great sleep schedules. It impacts their quality of life by impacting their grades. It also might keep them from trying out new things in the real world. It might discourage them from taking on the challenges of trying a new sport or investing in a new person. The things that we're wired to do during the teenage years, those necessary steps of growing up, are sometimes missed when kids spend too much time on technology. It can become all-consuming. Second, technology also shapes the way that they see and understand the world. I've been thinking about this. I'm sure a lot of you guys are very careful about the people you allow into your kids' lives. I'm sure that you care about who their friends are and you want to know them, and you have opinions on the people that they should be investing time in. I'm sure you want to know their teachers. But one thing we don't realize is that one of the biggest ways kids are learning to understand the world, one of the biggest influences in their lives, are the people that they're listening to online. When I was growing up, we used to call people that made videos on the internet YouTubers or maybe content creators. But now I think we have a very accurate new word for them, which is influencers, right? So I'm not going to give you a list of people that you should or shouldn't allow them to watch. Frankly, I'm not really online all that much anymore. I don't totally know. But I do know this, that the teenage brain is kind of like wet cement. People in their lives during these formative years can make an impact on the person they are for the rest of their lives. Are you aware of the people that they're watching? Are you aware of the people that are speaking into your kids' lives online? I think it's a really important thing. Just have conversations with them about the people that they're watching. Try to get to know them and know whether or not they're a good influence. Again, I can't tell you what to do or who to allow them to watch or not to. I don't know, and frankly, by the time your guys' kids are teens, I won't know who the popular people will someday be then. But just know this, it's important to be aware of who your kids are watching and the ways that that's shaping and forming them into the person they will ultimately someday become. And then finally, this is kind of a heavy one, but one of the greatest dangers of technology that I've seen is that it can become a gateway to sexual addiction. So according to the Child Mind Institute, 60 to 75% of boys have seen explicit videos online. They've seen things that they shouldn't have seen online. 60 to 75% of boys, again, I believe that's ages 12 to 15, have seen things that they shouldn't have online. Now, we tend to think of this as a boy problem, and it is. More prominently, guys struggle with this. But what I've heard is that there's actually a growing number of girls that are experiencing in this. In fact, 40 to 52% of girls have also seen things they shouldn't have seen online. The average age of first exposure is between 12 and 15, and some research is actually saying that that number is getting steadily younger over the years, kind of things that they're seeing and encountering online. So like we've said before, teens are constantly seeking out new stimulus. They're trying to seek out new things. Sometimes kids are drawn to these things, not out of sinful desire for addiction, but out of just curiosity. They don't know any better. And so they wind up seeing something online that can have big ramifications for the rest of their life. See, my biggest recommendation here is just to have some kind of restrictions on their smart device if you give them to them. Maybe a simple one is you just wait a little bit longer, wait till they've had some more years of maturity before giving them a smart device, before giving them access to the internet. I'm not saying it's gospel, but my mom, didn't give me a smartphone until I was 16 and could drive myself and needed GPS on my phone. It's kind of a reason for it. I had a little flip phone, I think, when I was 15, but I didn't need a smartphone until I was 16. And so maybe that's what you end up doing. Maybe you be very intentional about the age that you're choosing to give your kids access to the internet. And then when they get them, I'd really recommend putting some kind of restrictions on them. On the iPhone, there's an app called Screen Time in the settings. If you go to the Screen Time app in the settings, you can set some restrictions, and you can also set a password that you have control over so that you can go and change it. If you're going to do nothing else, there's an option there that says limit adult websites. Click that, come up with a passcode, keep everything else open if you want. But I'd say at minimum, I don't see any reason against doing that. Now, I think some parents might push back against this. They might push back against the idea of really heavily restricting what kids can see online. And they use the argument, I've heard this before, they use the argument like, well, I just want to give my kid freedom. The reality is this, sometimes in an attempt to give kids freedom, we might actually be giving them slavery to addiction. It's kind of like, if you had a kid, you wouldn't just leave them out in the open. You wouldn't just leave a teen with like a full cup of beer on the desk. You'd say, well, maybe I trust them, but why would I put them in a situation that could cause them harm? So I'd encourage you just to be careful. And I'll also say this too, as you think about like, I want to prepare them to be adults. I am a 29-year-old man. I live on my own. I have a full-time job. Again, I'm going to be married soon. And I've made the decision in my life to put some restrictions on my smartphone. There's a lot of things that I can't look up as an adult. I don't trust myself with full unregistered access to the internet. And part of that is because I'm in ministry and want to make sure I'm accountable. But I think for all young men of God, I think it's important to have some kind of boundaries in place. You're not limiting your kid from becoming an adult by giving them boundaries. Boundaries can be a good thing that can ultimately save us from falling into traps. All right. Another resource I'd recommend is called Covenant Eyes. It's an app that you can use to block specific websites and lets people see, you or someone else, see what they're looking at on their phone, and if something bad comes up, it kind of flags it and pings it. That can also be a good resource as well. Well, guys, in the end, we've talked about some of the most challenging things that teens deal with. We've talked about some ways you can navigate it, both mental health and learning how to recognize the symptoms of mental health, learning about building a support system that can help them as mental health challenges arise. And we've talked about technology, talked about the dangers it poses, that it can become all-consuming for teens, that it can radically shape the way they understand the world, and that it can be a gateway towards sexual addiction. But I don't want any of that to overshadow the goodness of the teenage years. See, once again, the teenage years are a necessary part, they're a needed part of God's good design, where young people begin in new and exciting ways to live out the image of God. And as I think about it, as you think about yourself as parents, as you think about yourself as moms, this is one of the years where your teens might need different help than they did as kids, but also it's one of the years when you can make the biggest impact on them for the kingdom. I want to end off by telling you guys a little bit of my testimony. I accepted Christ for the first time when I was about 4 or 5 years old. The way my mom tells it is I went up to her one day after church and confessed whatever sins I'd committed my first 4 years. So like eating my friend's Play-Doh or something. Like I don't know really what I had been doing back then. But I confessed my sins and asked her to pray for me. And I do believe from that point on I was in some way saved. But really things changed for me when I was in 8th grade. Remember, my life had been pretty easy. And then in 8th grade, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And for the first time in my life, I started asking questions about who God was. I started asking questions about what would happen when I died. I started asking questions about who would I be someday when my parents were no longer around. And guys, it was through those formative years for me as an 8th grader that I really dedicated my life to Jesus, when I made my faith my own. And so as scary as the teenage years are, as challenging as they may be, these may very well be the years where your kids truly make the relationship with God their own, where they walk away with a new, profoundly different-looking relationship with Jesus that will carry with them for the rest of their lives. So yes, the teenage years are challenging, but they're also good, because they were designed by a good God with a good plan. All right, well, I want to end off, hopefully I've got enough time, opening the floor for some questions that any of you guys might have. I'm sure there's plenty, and I'm sure I don't have the answer to all of them, but I will do my best. Yeah. Yeah.